Letting users of your web app search through their data, documents, and other information provides a ton of value, but most implementations fall flat. Today, I'm going to help you take your search to the next level using fuzzy search and just a few lines of code. So let's get to it. We're going to start by looking at a naive example of search and explain what we can do to actually improve it. So on the side, you'll see we have a list of books and we can search by title or the author's name and it returns. Within the code itself, we're just taking this hard-coded books array, and then we are going to be filtering on it. So we look for the title match, and we also remove any punctuation or quotation marks, and we have a author first name match as well as a last name match. Finally, we just return any matches that occur, and then that is what actually filters the list. The problem here, though, is what if we make a typo? So instead of John with an H, we do Jon. It's only off by one character, but suddenly nothing returns, and this is a huge problem. So to remedy this problem, we could either implement our own fuzzy search or we can use the fuse.js library, which is what I'm going to be teaching you guys about today. So simply put, fuse.js is an implementation of fuzzy search. So if I type old man, but I misspell it, so for instance, I add an S instead of an N, I still get the search results. And we can configure Fuse to be more lenient or less lenient depending on how we like it. But this also works for the last name as well. So here we try to misspell his last name and it doesn't work. So here on the left, you'll see we have a very similar search implementation, but we're using the Fuse library now. So we pass into this Fuse constructor the objects we're going to be searching through and then also the options. And here we can specify the different properties that we want to search for. So we have title, author.first name, author.last name, and tags, and then a couple of more parameters. So in particular, this threshold specifies how strict the algorithm is. So if we put a 1 here, it means that it will match for anything. So no matter what we put, the search algorithm is going to return everything. If we put a 0, it needs to be a perfect match. So if we do old man, and then we make a single typo, nothing's going to come up. So that is what the threshold is. Now, one of the glaring issues you might see is that sometimes we don't have all of our items or objects on the client side, and you are totally correct. Usually, we're going to be fetching some information from our database and then returning that in the search. Now, using Fuse for this is very possible, but there are some limitations we should be aware of. So just as an example, you'll see that we have this fuzzy search on the side, and we're calling this handle search function, which triggers this server action. So within the action, we're using very similar logic to the front end, but now we are simulating this database call with getBooks, right? So the problem here is that in this toy example, we only have, 10 or so books, but this could be, hundreds of thousands of records, right? And you have to retrieve all of these in order to pass them into Fuse. And this is the crux of the issue. When we cannot guarantee that the items returned from our database call are going to be somewhat small, a couple thousand, this can get out of hand very quickly and overload your database. So you're only going to want to use Fuse on the server side when you can guarantee that the items you're getting from your database won't exceed a certain threshold, because that's just going to cost you more money and it's going to slow down your app. And if you get to this point where Fuse is no longer a viable solution, you're going to have to look at more advanced solutions like Melee Search or Elasticsearch, which ultimately costs a lot more money and are going to have more overhead to set up. Finally, we're going to look at how the different options we pass into Fuse affect the search results. So as I explained previously, a higher threshold value means the search is going to be more lenient, and a lower threshold means it is more precise. So we're going to leave that around 0.6 for now. We also have this include matches checkbox. So when we add this, Fuse is actually going to return the indices of all the matches it finds in all the items. And then we can use that to render this custom HTML that highlights those matches. So that's going to be useful for debugging. We also have this location slider. So location specifies the index that we think the match is going to occur roughly at. So location of 0 means look at the beginning. Distance specifies how many characters past that location we're going to look for the match. So as we slide this down, you'll notice that we get less and less results because, for instance, in the Hamilton or fiction, it is a little bit further past that beginning index, right? So as we tweak this down, the last one remaining is John, because that is at 0 and we have a very small distance. We can also increase this minimum match character length. So once we get to 5, you'll see this entirely disappears because it's saying we need at least 5 characters to actually make a judgment here. So once we go to 5, it disappears. Finally, we can remove some of these titles from the search. So if we remove the first name, you'll see this disappears. And then we can also change the weights based on how important they are to the search. And that's how you add fuzzy search to your TypeScript app in just a couple of lines of code. So if you find this type of content useful, please consider subscribing or checking out my other videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.